Julian Cross stood quietly inside the grand courtroom of Veralis Prime. The floor beneath him was smooth and silver, reflecting the blue light above. Strange plants with glowing petals decorated the corners. Thousands of alien eyes watched from the audience stands, whispering in low voices. Julian was the only human in the room. He had come to this planet just 1 week ago as a junior, diplomatic envoy from Earth. His job was simple: help improve relations between humans and Veralians. But everything went wrong during the peace gathering. He had seen a child running toward a fire pit. Instinctively, Julian had jumped in and pulled her back. Everyone had stared at him in silence. He thought he had done something good, but the Veralians did not cheer. Instead, they screamed. The girl he had saved was one of the High Consul's granddaughters, and the ritual she was performing was sacred. Interrupting it, even to save her, was seen as a great dishonor. Now Julian stood in front of the tall judges, who wore long blue robes, their faces hidden behind crystal masks. The High Consul, leader of the Veralians, sat above them all. With his 3 granddaughters at his side, silent and unreadable, a deep, echoing voice filled the courtroom. Julian, Cross of Earth, you have broken the rite of first flame, interrupted. A royal bonding ceremony and dishonored sacred tradition. Do you speak in your defense? Julian cleared his throat. I meant no harm. I only wanted to help. The girl was in danger. Silence, the judge said, raising a long finger. Your words are not false, but your ignorance does not erase the shame you have caused. Julian looked up at the consul. I never wanted to offend anyone. I thought saving a life was more important than following a rule. A low murmur passed through the crowd. Some Veralians nodded, others frowned. The consul stood, tall and strong, his voice calm but heavy. Young human, your act of courage cannot be denied. But your action has touched ancient law. Bond interrupted must be restored. Julian looked confused. What does that mean? The consul raised one hand. By our laws, you must now restore what you have broken. You interfered with the bond. Among royal blood, to make peace, you must become part of that bond. Julian blinked. What are you saying? The consul looked to the crowd. The verdict is given. Julian Cross will be joined in union with my granddaughters Sorella Niari and Vexa. The crowd gasped. A ripple of whispers swept through the courtroom like wind through tall grass. Julian froze. Marry 3 alien women? He was just a diplomat, not a prince or a hero. This wasn't a punishment, at least not a painful one, but it felt more like a trap than a reward. He looked at the 3 granddaughters. Each one stared at him in silence. The oldest, Sorella, wore armor. Her golden eyes were sharp like blades. She looked like a soldier, strong and serious. The middle one, Niari, had smooth blue skin and long silver hair. She held a glowing tablet and seemed more curious than angry. The youngest Vexa was short and had bright eyes that almost sparkled with mischief. She tilted her head at Julian and gave a small smirk. Julian whispered, "This can't be real."
Ow.
2 guards walked forward. You will be escorted to the consul's residence. You have 7 sun cycles to prepare for the joining ceremony. Julian didn't argue. He didn't run. He just followed. Outside the courtroom, the sky of Veralis' Prime glowed with 2 suns. Strange creatures flew in the distance. The air smelled like flowers and metal. Julian was guided through tall towers and over clear bridges, everything shining and alien. As he rode in a floating pod beside the guards, his thoughts raced. Why marriage? Why me? Was this their way of punishment? Or was it politics? At the edge of the city, the pod stopped at a wide palace surrounded by water and gardens. He stepped out. A servant with green skin bowed and led him inside. Soon, he was in a large room with curved walls and glass ceilings, and waiting for him were Sorella, Niari, and Vexa. Sorella folded her arms. I do not agree with this. Niari looked at Julian. Earth's traditions are very different. This will be a challenge. Vexa smiled. Maybe it will be fun. Julian took a deep breath. I don't know why this is happening, but I'll try to understand. I didn't mean to offend anyone, maybe. Maybe we can make this work somehow. The 3 granddaughters exchanged glances. The silence stretched. Then Sorella spoke. Then you will face the rites of harmony. Julian frowned. What are those? Nyari answered. 3 trials, 1 for each of us. If you fail, the marriage will not happen. Julian looked at them all, the challenge clear in their eyes. He nodded slowly. Then I'll try. Let's see what these trials are. Julian woke early the next morning in a round, glass-walled room filled with soft blue light. Outside, flying creatures circled in the sky. The bed he had slept in was more like a nest soft, floating above the floor. He sat up slowly, still trying to believe what had happened. He was to marry 3 alien princesses. Not out of love, but as a punishment, a cultural correction. A soft sound came from the door, slid open, and the servant from last night entered. Good sunrise, honored one. The granddaughters await in the learning garden. Julian nodded, and followed. The garden was unlike anything on earth. Tall silver trees with glowing leaves surrounded small pools of still water. Colorful flying insects buzzed between flowers. Strange shapes floated in the air, holograms, showing moments from Viralian history. Julian saw them. Sorella. Nyari and Vex is standing near a large stone circle. Each looked different, not just in appearance, but in how they held themselves. Sorella wore armor again. Her arms were crossed, her eyes sharp, looked like a warrior ready for battle. Nyari stood next to a large tablet full of lights and symbols. She wore a long robe, and her hair glowed slightly in the sunlight. Vexa sat on the stone ledge, tossing small silver pebbles into the air, watching them hover before falling again. Julian walked forward. Good morning. None of them smiled. Sorella was the first to speak. You still have the choice to leave, Earthman. I gave my word I would stay, Julian replied calmly. Nayar, I looked up. Then you must understand something. This marriage is not for love or family. It is for politics, peace, and honor, Vexa added, and maybe a little fun. If you survive. Julian gave a half-smile. And the rites of harmony, Nyari nodded. 3 trials. Each of us gives 1. Must complete them to prove your understanding of who we are. Sorella stepped forward. I will go first. My trial begins now. Julian blinked. Now, she raised a staff. Trial of mind, strategy, decision, and courage. Follow me. They moved to a large training ground. Near the palace, dozens of glowing tiles lit the floor. A strange board was projected in the air, like a giant 3D chess game. Floating shapes moved as Sorella explained the rules. This is called Corrin's Path, she said. It is a battle of logic. Your goal is to lead a small force through enemy territory using only limited resources, or lose too many in your mission. Fails, win without honor, and you still lose. Julian stared at the floating pieces. All right, let's try. The game began. Sorella controlled the defending side, her movements fast and sharp. Julian guided a small team of glowing shapes, his soldiers around traps and attacks. At first, he struggled. He made small mistakes, but as the game continued, he started to understand. He used distractions. He saved his strongest units, protected the weak. In the final round, he made a surprising move, sending his commander forward alone to create an opening. His team escaped through the gap. The game ended. Silence followed. Sorella looked at him for a long time. You sacrificed your strongest unit. Julian nodded, because that's what a leader should do. He protects others, even at his own cost. Sorella's eyes softened just a little. You pass. Later that day, Julian sat in a quiet chamber with Nyari. She handed him a strange glowing cube. This is your next challenge, she said. The trial of spirit. Inside this cube is a puzzle. It tests your patience, memory, and emotion. Julian turned the cube in his hand. Shapes moved inside. Lights blinked. It reacts to your feelings, Nyari said. If your thoughts are unstable, it will become harder. If you lie, it will freeze. Julian sat down and began. The puzzle was confusing. Patterns shifted. Voices from inside the cube whispered questions about Earth. about his past, about loss and choices. Memories returned his family, his first mission, the mistakes he made. At one point he nearly gave up, but he paused, closed his eyes, breathed slowly. He remembered why he was here, not to escape punishment, but to build something better. The cube lit up in gold. Niari smiled softly. You pass. That night Julian found Vexa sitting by a glowing pond, feeding small fish with floating dust. Your turn, he asked. Vexa looked up. My trial is tomorrow, but it won't be like the others. She handed him a small shell. Just listen, she said. You're doing better than we expected. Julian held the shell to his ear. It played a soft song. It sounded like wind, stars, and laughter. He smiled. Thank you, he whispered. Vexa laughed. Don't thank me yet. My trial's the hardest. One palace waiting. Today was the final and most important day of the rites of harmony. The last trial, the trial of union, would be given by Vexa, the youngest granddaughter. Julian's thoughts wandered back to the two trials he had already passed. The first, the trial of mind, had tested his ability to think quickly and lead wisely. Sorella's sharp eyes had watched every move he made. When he sacrificed his strongest piece to save the others, Sorella had finally nodded in respect. The second, the trial of spirit, had alleged his patience and honesty. Niari's glowing cube had seemed almost alive, responding to his feelings and memories. When he calmed his mind and focused on hope, the cube had lit up golden, signaling success. But Julian knew Vexa's trial would be different. Vexa was playful and unpredictable. He could not guess what she might ask. Vexa appeared at the entrance to the courtyard, wearing simple clothes but with a spark in her eyes. She smiled warmly. Welcome, Julian, she said. Are you ready? Julian nodded. As ready as I can be. Vexa led him to a small clearing surrounded by tall trees with silver leaves. In the center was a round stone platform with strange carvings. This trial is not like the others, Vexa explained. It is about trust, teamwork, and understanding. She stepped onto the platform and gestured for Julian to join her. Suddenly, the platform began to glow softly. The air around them shimmered. Julian felt the ground vanish beneath his feet and then everything went dark. When Julian opened his eyes, he found himself in a strange place. The sky was deep purple, and stars twinkled all around. The air was quiet except for a soft humming sound. Vexa's voice came from nearby, though he could not see her. Welcome to the trial of union. Julian took a step forward, then another. The ground beneath him was soft, like clouds. Strange shapes floated in the air, glowing orbs that moved like fireflies. You must find me, Vexa said. But you cannot use your eyes. Julian frowned. Not use my eyes? How? Your other senses will guide you, Vexa's voice replied. Trust in them. Trust in yourself. Julian closed his eyes. The purple sky faded. He took a slow breath and listened. The humming grew louder in one direction. He felt the soft brush of something near his hand. He reached out and touched a floating orb, shimmered and moved closer. Slowly, Julian followed the sounds and touches. He sensed warmth, cool air, soft vibrations underfoot. After what felt like a long time, Julian heard Vexa's soft laughter. Almost there, she said. Then Julian felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. He turned and opened his eyes. Vexa was smiling beside him. You did well, she said. You trusted your feelings and senses. You did not rely on sight alone. Julian smiled. It was harder than I thought, but I understood. Trust is important. Vexa's smile grew wider. That is the lesson. The shimmering space faded, and they returned to the courtyard. Sorella and Niari waited nearby, watching. Julian looked at each of the three granddaughters. I have finished the trials. I passed. Sorella nodded, though her eyes still held caution. You have shown strength and wisdom. Niari smiled softly. Patience. You surprise me? Vexa stepped closer. But the true trial is not over. Julian frowned. What do you mean? Now, Vexa said. We must learn to live together. Trust, respect, and care are harder than any challenge. Julian thought about what she said. He had been tested on mind, spirit, and union. But the hardest part was still ahead. That evening, Julian sat in the garden alone. The two suns were setting, casting orange and pink light over the silver trees. He thought about the granddaughter Sarala, their strength and pride. Niari, with her wisdom and calm. Vexa, with her laughter and light. He wondered if they could truly accept him, human, as a partner. Suddenly footsteps approached. Sarella stood nearby, arms crossed. You did well today. Julian looked up. Thank you. Sarella's voice was softer than before. I did not expect you to pass the trials. Julian smiled. I did not expect to be here at all. Sarella nodded. Perhaps we will see if you can survive the next test living with us. Double quotes. Julian chuckled. I will try. In the days that followed, Julian began to learn more about Varelian culture. The three granddaughters taught him their customs, language, and stories. At times they argued among themselves, but they also shared moments of laughter and kindness. Julian felt a strange feeling growing inside him, a mix of respect, friendship, and something deeper. He did not know what the future held, but he knew one thing. This union was more than a punishment. It was a chance, perhaps the greatest chance of Lax. His life, the days after the failed attack, were filled with a mix of tension and hope. Julian noticed how the three granddaughters acted differently toward him. Sarella, once cold and distant, began to show a hint of respect in her sharp eyes. Niari stayed curious and attentive, often asking questions about Earth and Julian's experiences and Vexa. She was as playful as ever, teasing him but also watching closely. Her bright eyes filled with quiet understanding. One afternoon, Julian found himself alone with Sarella in the palace training grounds. The sun was warm, and the silver trees cast long shadows on the ground. You have changed since the trials began, Sarella said, her voice soft but firm. At first I thought you weak, but your actions show strength. Julian smiled gently. I only try to do what is right. Sarella looked away for a moment. Strength is not just physical. It is about courage to face what scares you. Julian nodded slowly. I am still learning. She reached out and lightly touched his arm, a small gesture, but one Julian never expected from the proud warrior. Meanwhile, Niari invited Julian to the palace library. The room was filled with ancient books and glowing scrolls. I want to understand Earth better, she said, handing him a tablet. Teach me about your world, your history, your people. Julian eagerly shared stories of Earth's great cities, its struggles, and its dreams. Niari listened intently, her eyes shining with interest. Your world is full of hope, she said. Sometimes I wonder if Voralis can be the same. At night, Julian sat with Vexa in the gardens. The two suns had set, and stars shone bright. You are different from the humans I expected, Vexa said with a mischievous smile. You don't give up. You care. Julian looked at her, surprised by her words. Why do you smile like that? He asked. Because Vexa said softly, maybe this strange marriage will become something real. Julian's heart beat faster. I want that too. But the closeness came with confusion. Julian struggled with his own feelings. Was it right to care for all three? Could they really live together peacefully? The granddaughters, too, were divided. Sarella's pride kept her cautious. Niari's wisdom made her hesitant, always thinking of duty. Vexa's warmth called for hope and joy. One evening, Julian spoke honestly with the three of them in the palace's quiet sitting room. I don't want this marriage to be just a sentence, he said. I want it to be a partnership, a family. But I need to know if you want the same. Sarella was the first to answer. I respect you, Julian, but I will not be ruled by duty alone. Niari nodded. I see the strength in you, but my mind is still cautious. Vexa smiled gently. I believe in what we can be. Together. Julian looked at each of them, feeling hope and uncertainty. The next day, a small ceremony was held in the palace. Officials from many planets came to witness. The consul stood tall and proud. This union, he said, is more than law. It is a promise of peace, trust, and future. Julian and the three granddaughters stood side by side. Though their feelings were still new and uncertain, they knew the world was watching as the ceremony ended. Lorella quietly took Julian's hand. "Let us face the future," she said. Julian squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of his new life. That night, Julian looked at the stars, thinking of Earth, Veralis, and the strange journey that had brought him here. His heart was divided, but his will was clear. He would protect the granddaughters. He would protect peace, and perhaps in time, love would grow. The days passed quietly at the Consul's palace. Julian grew more comfortable with Sorella Nyari, Vexa. They shared stories of their planet, of the history and customs that shaped Veralian life. In return, Julian told them about Earth, its oceans, mountains, and the stars that humans dreamed of reaching. But beneath the calm surface, danger waited. One evening, as twilight fell and the two suns dipped below the horizon, Julian walked through the palace gardens. The air smelled of silver flowers and fresh rain. The trees whispered softly in the cool breeze. Suddenly, a shadow moved between the trees. Julian froze. Before he could react, a figure stepped out, cloaked in dark robes, face hidden by a hood. The figure held a small blade that shimmered faintly under the moonlight. "Stay back," Julian warned, raising his hands. The figure laughed softly. "You are the human who dares to marry the Consul's granddaughters." Julian's heart raced. "Who are you? Why are you here?" The figure took a step closer. "I am a servant of those who do not want peace between our worlds. You are a threat to them." Julian looked around. No guards were nearby. The figure lunged forward. Julian ducked, narrowly avoiding the blade. He grabbed a nearby branch and swung it toward the attacker. The figure blocked with the blade, then disappeared into the shadows. Julian ran to the palace, shouting for help. Inside the main hall, Julian found Sorella and Nyari waiting. "An attack?" Sorella asked sharply. Julian nodded, breathless. "Someone tried to hurt me. I think they want to stop the marriage." Nyari's face turned serious. "This is worse than we thought. There are those in Veralis who do not want this union." Clenched her fists. "Then we must be ready." Julian's mind raced. If enemies were so close, they could strike again. He needed to protect the granddaughters and himself. The next days were tense. Guards increased their patrols. Julian trained with Sorella, learning to fight with the strange weapons of Veralis. Though not a warrior, he discovered that his quick thinking and courage helped him stay safe. Nyari worked on decoding messages and finding clues. She spent hours in the library, searching for signs of the attackers. Vexa, ever playful, tried to lighten the mood. She taught Julian how to move quietly through the palace, sometimes teased him about his awkwardness. One night, as the palace slept, Nyari burst into Julian's room, holding a small data device. "I found something," she whispered urgently. "Secret communications between a high-ranking advisor and unknown enemies." Julian frowned. "An insider?" Nyari nodded. "Yes, someone close to the Consul." Julian's heart sank. Betrayal within the family could destroy everything. "We must act carefully," Nyari said. "If we accuse the wrong person, we will lose trust," Julian agreed. They planned to gather more evidence before telling the Consul. Days later, Julian and the granddaughters attended a gathering in the palace halls. Diplomats and nobles from many planets came to watch the upcoming joining ceremony. Julian felt eyes on him, some curious, some suspicious. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A figure appeared on the balcony above a man in a dark cloak. He raised a strange device that sent a pulse through the hall. People gasped and stumbled, caught by the wave. Julian's vision blurred, but he focused. He spotted the man, the attacker from the garden. He moved quickly toward the balcony, with Sorella and Nyari beside him. As Julian climbed the stairs, the attacker tried to flee. Julian grabbed his arm. "Why are you doing this?" Julian demanded. The man sneered. Because the union between humans and Viralians will bring ruin to our proud people. We will not be ruled by outsiders. Julian looked into the man's eyes and saw anger and fear. Sorella called guards. The attacker was taken away after the incident. The consul gathered Julian and his granddaughters. "We have faced shadows among the stars," the consul said solemnly. "But your courage and loyalty have protected our family and our future." He looked at Julian. "You have earned my respect." Julian bowed. "Thank you, consul." The consul turned to his granddaughters. "The joining ceremony will proceed. Let this union be a symbol of peace and strength." That night, Julian stood on the palace balcony. Looking at the stars above Viralis Prime, he thought about the dangers ahead, but also about the trust he had begun to build. The shadows were still there, but so was hope. The palace had never felt so tense. Julian could sense it in the stiff faces of the guards and the hurried whispers of the servants. Though the joining ceremony had passed, the threat against the union had not disappeared. If anything, it had grown stronger. One afternoon, Niari approached Julian with a worried look. "I have found new evidence," she said quietly. "The one who sent the attacker is closer than we thought." Julian frowned. Niari looked around before answering. An advisor to the consul himself. Someone with power and secrets. Julian's heart sank. To betray the consul was to betray all of Viralis. But why? And how? "We must act carefully," Niari warned. "If we accuse without proof, the consequences will be severe." Julian nodded. "Then we must find proof." The next days were filled with quiet investigation. Julian, Sorella, Niari, and Vexa worked as a team, moving carefully through the palace halls and shadowed corners. Vexa's sharp eyes found hidden doors and secret messages. Sorella's strength and speed helped them avoid guards and stay safe. Niari used her knowledge to decode coded letters and listen for whispered plans. One evening, a soft voice came from inside. "The human is dangerous. If he completes the union, the old ways will end," a harsh voice replied. "He must be stopped. The consul's trust will be ours again." Julian's blood ran cold. They had found their traitors. That night, the group planned carefully. "We must tell the consul," Niari said. "But only when we have proof," Julian agreed. "We need a way to catch them in the act." The plan was simple but risky. Julian would pretend to meet alone with the supposed traitor. The others would watch and listen. The next day, Julian waited in a small garden near the palace gates. The sun was low, casting long shadows. A figure appeared. It was Melrek, the consul's trusted advisor, kind on the surface, but dangerous beneath. "Julian," Melrek said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I hear you are close to the Granddaughters." Julian kept his voice calm. "I seek peace, Melrek, nothing more." Melrek's smile twisted. "Peace is a lie. The old ways must stay." Suddenly, Melrek pulled out a hidden device, shining a faint light. Julian's heart beat fast. Before Melrek could act, Sorella and Vexa appeared from the shadows. "Enough," Sorella said, her voice cold. Melrek's eyes flashed. "You betray your own family, Niari." And the guards arrived quickly, surrounding the traitor. The consul was shocked when the truth came out. Melrek had planned to break the union and start a war. But thanks to Julian and the Granddaughters, the plot was stopped. The consul looked at Julian with new respect. "You have protected my family and my planet. You have shown great loyalty." Julian bowed. "I only want peace." The next day, the palace was filled with celebration. The union was no longer just a sentence, but a symbol of hope. Julian, Sorella, Niari, and Vexa stood together, united not just by law, but by trust and courage. The future was still unknown, but for the first time, it felt possible. The day of the grand ceremony had finally arrived. The palace of Viralis Prime was decorated with shimmering banners and flowers from every corner of the galaxy. The air buzzed with excitement, hope, and a touch of nervousness. Julian stood with Sorella, Niari, and Vexa at his side. They wore elegant robes woven with silver threads that caught the light with every movement. Around them, diplomats, nobles, and citizens from many worlds had gathered to witness the joining, a symbol of peace between Earth and Veralis. The High Consul stood tall on the main stage. His voice rang clear across the crowd. Today we unite not only 3 granddaughters with 1 human, but also 2 worlds. This marriage is a bond of trust, respect, and friendship. It marks a new chapter for all of us. Julian glanced at the 3 women beside him. Each had grown so much since their first meeting, from strangers, bound by law, to partners ready to face the future together. The ceremony began with the traditional Varelian rites. Soft music filled the air, made by strange instruments with deep melodic tones. The guests watched as Julian and the granddaughters exchanged symbols of their bond rings forged from the rarest metals of Veralis and Earth. Sorella took Julian's hand first, her eyes steady and calm. Together, we faced the challenges. Ahead, she said, NYA or I followed, her voice thoughtful and warm. With understanding, we will build a better future. Finally, Vexa smiled brightly, and with laughter, we will enjoy the journey. Julian felt a warmth in his heart he had never known before. I promise to honor and protect you all, he said. Together, we will make peace and strength. After the ceremony, the crowd cheered, and music filled the palace halls. Joining was not just a legal bond, but a celebration of new friendships and alliances. Julian and the granddaughters spoke with diplomats from many planets. They shared stories, dreams, and hopes for a future without war. The joining had already begun to change minds and hearts across the galaxy that evening. Julian and his partners stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The twin suns had set, and stars sparkled in the clear sky. Ships from Earth and Veralis sailed into space, ready to explore together. Julian looked at Sorella, Niari, and Vexa. What happens now? He asked quietly. Sorella smiled softly. Bill Niari nodded. We teach. Vexa laughed. We live. Julian smiled back. Then let's begin. The union was more than a marriage. It was a promise that different worlds could come together to create something better. Julian knew challenges would come, but he also knew that with trust, courage, and love, anything was possible. As the stars shone above Veralis Prime, a new era began, one of hope, unity, and peace.